So I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. I've often noted that God gave us two hands so that we could say, on the one hand, if we didn't have two hands, then we would not have an expression that says things are this way, but things are also that way. And that would void a lot of Jewish conversations and also most of the Talmud. I've also told the story more than a few times about a teacher of mine who mentioned an event of very tragic proportions and noted how many people would say, yes, this happened, but, and then they would add some kind of explanation or lesson that came out of it. And he noted that this is so often a very grave mistake. We should not speak of tragedy and too quickly link it to good that may follow from it. It is too soon to say that on the one hand, we are still in the upswing of this global pandemic, but on the other hand, we are seeing great acts of humanity and courage, especially by our medical professionals. And it is too soon to say, and it may never be time to say, yes, there are more than 1 million cases of this virus worldwide, and the death toll is projected to truly ungodly numbers, but efforts are ramping up to get needed supplies where they need to be. Industries are retooling to be of assistance, and even our spiritual lives and learning commitments may have actually intensified during this crisis. Those are all true statements, but we have to be careful about linking them, about making these connections in a way that might diminish the real suffering and fear that so many are experiencing at this very moment. We would gladly give back everything that is counted on the one hand, and everything that comes after this is happening, but to have never heard of, been frightened by, or having to find or pray for the courage, strength, or optimism we need as we all face uncertainty in the near and at least the medium-term future. We can be grateful for the blessings in our lives and for heroic medical staff, and we should be. We can and should pray that we and our loved ones stay healthy and safe, and we must follow guidelines so that no one unnecessarily becomes infected or unwittingly infects somebody else. And we have to try to keep perspective, have patience, and be vigilant in not allowing the bonds of family, friendship, and community to fray in these times that are unprecedented for pretty much all of us. Had the opportunity the last couple of Tuesdays to teach a lunch and learn on Jewish responses to the coronavirus. And while these times are previously unknown for us, societies around the world and Jewish communities throughout history have faced plague-like conditions before. And parallels have been taught, rituals seeking to call God's attention to the plight of God's children have been recalled, if not revitalized. And reminders that we have been through similar circumstances before and have recovered and rebuilt have also been offered. When you're part of a 3,000-year-old tradition, the likelihood of experiencing something absolutely new and different is not very great. But it is new for us. And I don't know about you, but I think that we are feeling our way through it in all of its very sudden effects day by day. sometimes hour by hour. And however you or your family has been impacted, I pray that you, our country, and our world will have needed strength and hope to get through whatever comes next. It is Shabbat HaGadol, so a Passover reference or two this morning is certainly appropriate. There's an interesting question that's asked about when the Passover narrative really began. Some would say it was with, and a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. This Pharaoh was worried the Israelites were growing too numerous, so he enslaved them. But that is really only the transition to slavery. It is not the beginning of slavery. Earlier points might be the end of the Joseph story when, seeking food to eat and seed for crops, the Egyptians willingly gave ownership of their land over to the king, nationalizing the country and setting the foundation for full reliance on the centralized authorities that would ease the adoption of slave status for everyone. No one owned their land anymore. They were effectively serfs. Everyone worked for Pharaoh. Slavery was just a small skip or a short hop from there. Still others look even earlier. Believe it or not to the end, but to the beginning of the Joseph story. From the perspective of the narrative in the Torah, the whole Egypt experience might not have happened had Joseph and his brothers had a better relationship. You can connect the dots. Joseph is arrogant and he is his father's favorite. This makes his brothers jealous. They throw him in a pit and sell him to a caravan of traders who then drop him off in Egypt. He sinks low and then rises to power, hides his identity from his brothers, and so on. It all, the whole story maybe, goes back to a lack of understanding and compassion on both sides of the dynamic and relationship of Joseph and his brothers. There is no such ethical lapse to which we can even possibly trace the origin of the current crisis. Anyone casting blame or aspersion on this or that group or nationality does not have a place in the needed conversation about how to address its effects so we could save as many lives as can be saved. I learned late this week that regimes around the world, not so democratic to begin with, are seizing emergency powers ostensibly to control and try to mitigate the spreading of this virus, but using those emergency powers to further discriminate against and even persecute already discriminated against minority groups, people of different nationalities living within their borders, those of indigenous descent, which is such a huge challenge in the global South especially, and also the LGBTQI population, many of whom live in fear in the best of times, and today find themselves in even more dangerous circumstances, including being blamed for the genesis and the spread of this virus where nothing could be further from the truth. It is not our descent into pandemic, but our recovery from it that will depend on the kindness that comes from selflessness and outward directed action and compassion. We will all be measured and either fulfilled or regretful for the assistance we did or did not offer, the call we did or did not place, and as best we are or were able to, the way we stood by the organizations, local and national, whose work we believed in and supported before this crisis, support which is even more essential right now. In addition to the Lunch and Learn on Jewish responses to COVID-19, I just finished teaching an excellent 10-week Melton class on social justice. I say excellent not in reference to how I taught it, that's up to others to say, but to the curriculum itself, which is brand new and really a work of educational art. I enjoyed it so much, and it impacted me and our students on many levels, including in the way it provided specifically Jewish motivation for justice work that does not only affect Jews. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about this in the future, along with the invitation to take the class. But I want to mention just one idea from it on this particular and very different Shabbat Hagadol. The whole course is in a way built around two concepts of justice, one of which is termed chesed and the other tzedek. Chesed is an act of kindness done for someone in need, the impact of which is really important in the moment, but which may have no long-term lasting effect. The classic example is giving someone who is hungry some food. Tzedek is an act of justice that seeks to figure out why the hungry person has no food in the first place and to fix that. And the classic tzedek response to hunger is to try to help that person find work or access to a support system that will make sure they have not just that one meal, but all the other ones as well. Tzedek work is done on communal and national levels as well. It asks, what are the inherent imbalances and power dynamics that cause some to have to struggle to break cycles of poverty, chronic untreated illness, nutrition deficits, and either unemployment or underemployment? And how are those addressed and improved through partnerships, advocacy, communal organizations, nonprofits, non-governmental organizations, and more? Most tzedakah response is done on the chesed level. We see someone in need, we want to help. And this is critically important. But unsurprisingly, the curriculum asked us to consider more strongly the tzedek aspect of establishing a more just world. And we spent a lot of time on that and saw how past initiatives, many involving Jews as leaders or supporters of these initiatives, have succeeded in their work. Yet it can also not be denied that right now we are in a chesed crisis. Immediate needs are paramount. Systemic imbalances will have to once again wait to be addressed. People here and around our country and the world will need food, medicine, and shelter. Projects to bring things like clean water and better agricultural practices are on hold, while basic humanitarian needs are met. And as always, the crisis will be worse where people have fewer resources. You can see an example of this in a map that clearly shows how people of means can afford to stay home and more easily avoid becoming infected, while people of lesser means simply have to be out and about to acquire even their basic needs, if they can even find them. Chesed now, tzedek later. Kindness now, structural change later. As I had the chance to say between Mincha and Mariv on Thursday, all around the world, humanity is for once focused on the very same thing: getting through and past this global health crisis, saving as many lives as possible while doing so. Though it is too soon, to think of lessons we might learn and act on from this unwelcome experience. It is not too soon to note that when it does conclude, whenever then that might be, all the old crises, needs, and tzedek level work to repair a broken world will remain and will actually be even more important and pressing than in the pre-COVID era. May God give us the strength we need to persevere with optimism, to help how and where we can, and to celebrate differently but meaningfully the upcoming Passover holiday. And as we do, may we at least plan to learn about and seek ways to address how we can be partners in bringing our world a little closer to the better one that is possible and very much needed. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to turn to the Musaf service, which begins Chatzi Kaddish in our Shabbat Festival, Sim Shalom Sidurim. Chatzi Kaddish can be found on page 155.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, בעלמא דבקותי וימליך מלכותי,